gentlemen, we have a little treat for you today. The Cabin Kids are going to sing
After You're Gone.
After You're Gone.
By the time the 1930s arrived, the effects of the Great Depression were still being felt around the globe. Think of the 30s as a big musical chairs game, where everyone is rushing to get a place as the music is about to start. Major political changes, the rise of strong leaders, and the beginnings of hostilities that would turn into worldwide conflicts would all occur during this decade. The 1930s are about to become exciting. 30 was a year that seemed to be holding its breath. Global economies were left reeling from the 1929 stock market crisis, much like a boxer who has been hit too many times. Everywhere they looked, people were waiting for the next blow and tightening their belts. But even in these tough times, there were signs of resilience. In the world of sports, it was a huge occasion when the first FIFA World Cup began in Uruguay. It was a worldwide gathering that united nations, even if they were simply kicking a ball around. Uruguay were the first ever football world champions after winning the competition. It was a wonderful moment that showed everyone that people could still unite and celebrate in difficult circumstances. In opposition to British colonial rules, Mahatma Gandhi was leading the Salt March in India, a 240-mile march to the sea where he produced salt. Gandhi's nonviolent demonstration served as a reminder that occasionally, even if it's only seasoning for a revolution, a little salt can make all the difference in the world. Then, in 1931, New York City decided it was time for a real uplift. After completion, the Empire State Building stood over the city like a ray of hope. Standing at 102 stories, it was the highest skyscraper in the world, and a testament to human desire reaching for the stars, even in the direst circumstances. The Japanese invasion of Manchuria, which was taking place simultaneously around the world, served as a sobering reminder that not everyone was happy to climb upwards, but rather wanted to expand outward with terrible consequences. Something big was developing in the Arabian Peninsula at the same period. While Abdulaziz ibn Saud was occupied with consolidating his authority over the various territories, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was formally established in 1932. It was like piecing together a giant jigsaw puzzle in the middle of the desert. Only this puzzle came with a lot more sand and significantly higher stakes. Amelia Earhart was busy creating history in the United States, where she was the first female pilot to cross the Atlantic on her own. Her accomplishment served as a breath of fresh air and a reminder that if you're willing to deal with some turbulence, you can still soar to new heights during difficult circumstances.
It has no significance in aviation and is only a personal satisfaction to me.
The political climate in Europe was changing, and not in a good way. With the ascent to power of Adolf Hitler in 1933, the Weimar Republic in Germany was transformed into the Third Reich. It was unsettling and hard to look away from, like watching a slow-motion car accident. In the United States, Franklin Roosevelt took office and began implementing his New Deal programs right away, aiming to pull the country out of the economic mire. His fireside chats became a source of comfort for many, as he reassured the American public
that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
It was a bold statement, but given the state of the world, fear had some pretty stiff competition.
Roosevelt verlangt endlich die Bereitwilligkeit, ihm die Zusicherung zu geben, dass die deutschen Streitkräfte das Staatsgebiet folgender unabhängiger Nationen nicht angreifen.
By 1934, these changes in power were having an impact on people across the world.
Many of which are caused by internal dissension. And if he can't do it one way, he tries another, including bombs.
The Long March, a calculated retreat spanning thousands of kilometers that took more than a year to finish, was started by Mao Zedong and his supporters. It was more of an exhausting marathon through some of the most difficult terrain one could imagine than a march. Over the Atlantic, the United States was experiencing the Dust Bowl, where enormous clouds of dirt blew across the plains, transforming day into night and blanketing everything in a thick layer of hopelessness. It served as a warning that the natural world can be just as cruel as any government. As the years marched on, 1935 brought with it the passage of the Nuremberg Laws in Germany, which stripped Jews of their citizenship and laid the groundwork for the horrors that were yet to come. It was a chilling indication of the darkness that was spreading across Europe. During this period, Mussolini's Italy invaded Ethiopia in Africa, proving that fascist goals weren't limited to Europe. The world was becoming an increasingly perilous place, akin to a pressure cooker with the heat set to maximum intensity. Though it wasn't much better, 1936 did have some humorous moments. For example, at the Berlin Olympics, African-American athlete Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals, much to Hitler's anger as he wanted to demonstrate the supremacy of Aryans. It was a spectacular take-that moment on the world stage. Meanwhile, in Spain, the Spanish Civil War was erupting, a brutal conflict that was a precursor to the larger battles that would soon engulf the entire continent. Spain was a microcosm of what was coming, a brutal, bloody struggle that left no one untouched. Things appeared significantly worse by 1937. 36 persons were killed when the enormous German airship, the Hindenburg, caught fire during its attempt to dock in New Jersey. This was one of the first disasters to be seen live to the public. It was also recorded on film and aired on radio.
It bursts in the flames. Get it started. It's bright and it's bright. It's bright and terrible. Oh my, get out of the way, please. It's burning, bursting into flames and it's falling on the morning fast and all the folks agree that this is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, the humanity.
If a film about the 1930s were made, it would be an intense drama with unexpected endings that will leave you hanging on the edge of your seat. As it pursued its aggressive expansion in the Far East, Japan launched a full-scale invasion of China, starting what would turn out to be one of the bloodiest wars in history. The Munich Agreement of 1938 saw Hitler able to grab the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia in an unsuccessful attempt by Britain and France to prevent war. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. It was the diplomatic equivalent of giving your lunch money to a bully in the hopes that he'll leave you alone. The discovery of oil in Saudi Arabia paved the way for the nation to become a global leader in energy. The Middle East would never be the same after this discovery, which fueled both the forces of war and the post-war economy of the world. Convincing many listeners that Martians were in fact invading Earth, Orson Welles' radio broadcast of the War of the Worlds was simultaneously spreading panic throughout the United States. It was a quite terrifying joke. But in a decade like this, who could blame people for thinking the worst was yet to come?
4 or 5 years later, I was on the air doing a show. Suddenly, a gentleman darted into the radio studio, held up his hand and said, "We interrupt this broadcast to bring you an announcement. Pearl Harbor has just been attacked." Of course, this very serious and terrible news was never believed. Not for hours by anybody in America, because they all said, well, there he goes again, really. All the bad taste was funny once, but not a second time.
The world was on the verge of collapse by 1939. When Hitler invaded Poland, Europe was eventually pushed over the edge and World War II broke out. There was no turning back now that the long-brewing conflict had finally erupted. Thus, as the 1930s drew to an end, the globe found itself on the verge of yet another major war, but this time with renewed resiliency and resolve. It's going to be a powerful decade, both literally and figuratively. The 1940s promised to be a whole new ballgame, because the next chapter will be full of historical drama and excitement, with a few plot twists you won't see coming. See you in the next decade.